G'day everybody, I'm Kupala and welcome back to part 3 of our 2D block-based building mechanic tutorial series, which is proving so far to be a little bit easier to build than it is to say. In this video we're going to cover the building system itself, so the player's controls that will let them place blocks into the game, as well as delete them and cycle through a list of available blocks that they can place. We'll also put in some basic checks to control where the player can't place them, that sort of thing, as well as like a distance from the player, because that's going to be an important part of this. Otherwise there might as well be no point having a player at all. So we'll get into that. It's actually not going to be too complicated. There's a couple of things we just need to set up first, and I've already got them in place, so I'll just cover them very quickly. The first of those is I've added a few layers, so I'll go to the layers here. I've added one for solid blocks, one for the backing blocks, and if you remember from the block system itself, those are the two different types we're going to have. One of them is going to block the player, the other one's not, so sort of like a foreground and a background style of object or block. I've also got one for the player and one for the ground. I can't remember if I set them up in the last video. I don't think I did. So if you don't have those, add those in now. And it's pretty straightforward. We're not going to assign the solid or backing blocks yet. We're going to do that in the script when we create the objects. The ground layer I've just assigned the ground object to that layer. You can see it there. It does have a collider attached to it, so that'll be important. Same goes for the player. Now I've got a couple of child objects. Those aren't on the player's layer. I've still got them on default. All I've done is put the parent object on the player layer, and he's got a box collider attached to him as well as a rigid body. So it doesn't matter however you've got your player set up, as long as they're going to collide with something and you've got them on their own layer, the rest should work as intended. Cool. There's also one other thing, and I'll just bring that up now. If we go back to the block system script that we wrote, I made a bit of a mistake. These need to be public, so in the block class itself, you'll just need to set those variables to public. So we'll do that now, do it very quickly. Won't be 1 second. There we go, cool. And save that. Alright. What? No, we'll just save that one. Alright, cool. Sorry, I had a temporary script there. Never mind. Alright, if we go back to the scene, everything else should pretty much be as we left it. I don't think I changed anything else. Actually, one thing, sorry. If you go to Edit, go to the Project Settings and the Physics 2D, you just want to make sure that the player is not colliding with the backing block layer. So just make sure those two layers won't collide with each other. Because we will be putting a collider on the backing blocks just to allow us to do the checks. So if you don't do that, the player will collide with all the blocks, even the background ones, which we don't want. Alright, cool. Sorry, that's everything. I have created a build system script, but it's just empty. We'll bring that up in a second. So you might want to create that one, just a new C# script called build system or whatever you like. And that I'll bring up now. Like I said, it's just blank. I've removed the start and updates, but other than that, it should be exactly the same. So we'll get to building that. The first thing we're going to actually need is some way to turn the build mode on, so the player will actually have a choice as to whether or not they're building or just roaming around the world. If you're adapting this to your own game, you'll probably find some way to set this. We're just going to keep it simple and assign it to like the E key, perhaps. Seems the best one for me. So we'll go ahead and create a couple of variables. The first thing we're going to need to do is get a reference to the block system script. The build system we're going to attach to the game manager object, the same as the block system, so this shouldn't be too hard, but we will need a variable for that. So we'll just create one, private block system, we'll call it block sys. There we go. Reference to the block system script. There we go. Easy peasy. What else? We'll need to store an ID for the blocks, so as we're cycling through them or scrolling through the ones we want to build, we'll need something for that. I don't think we'll use it just yet, but we'll create it anyway. Variables to hold data regarding current block type. That'll do. So the first one, we'll use an int, and we'll call it current block ID. So this will be the ID of the block that we have currently got selected. And we'll need a reference to a block object itself. Private block, why isn't it recognizing that? Doesn't matter. Work that out soon. There we go. Alright, cool. What else will we want? We're going to need a template. So we're actually going to need an object to follow the mouse cursor around the world so the player knows where they're building a block. So we'll need to store a couple of references for that. Variables for the block template. That's what we'll call it. So we'll want a game object itself. My script is being weird. This is Visual Studio being its normal self. Carry on and see how we go. Block template. There we go. So a reference to that one. Private. And we're also going to want to access its sprite renderer. Private sprite renderer, which we'll call current rend. So this is going to store a reference to the sprite renderer attached to the current template object. Hope that makes sense. It will. Don't worry. Now we're going to need a couple of different booleans throughout this system. So but the only one we're going to need at the moment is one to control if we're building or not. First one we'll have, well, probably the only one for now, private bool build mode on. And we'll set that to false when it starts. Alright, cool. I reckon that's probably all we're going to need for now, because all we want to do is turn it on and off. We don't really want to do much more than that just yet. So we'll get to writing this and get it going. So we'll say private void awake. We want to store a reference to the block system. So, there we go. And what are we going to use for that? We'll just use a get component, I'd say. So block sys is going to equal get component. Yeah, I'm going to have to change that. That's going to drive me crazy. System. That's all we need to do for there. Alright. Just give us 1 second, guys. I'm just going to try and sort out Visual Studio and try and get it to stop being stupid. Alright, there we go. Much better. Fixed it up. And because of that, I noticed there's a mistake. There we go. So this actually needs to be the block system, not the build system. That's okay. Let's fix it. There we go. Yay! Visual Studio is behaving. Alright, cool. So we've got a reference to the block system. We're going to need that because that stores all the information about the different blocks in the game. What are we doing first? We're going to create the build mode on and off, which we'll do in in updates, sorry. It's going to be pretty straightforward. Just some simple key press stuff. Okay. If E key pressed, toggle build mode. Alright, go. So we'll say if input dot get key down, oops, E. So if the player presses the E key, alright, cool. Build mode on is going to equal the opposite of build mode on. So if it's true, it's going to be false. If it's false, it's going to be true. So we're just going to flip it. Flip ball. There we go. If, what are we going to do? So if block template does not equal null. So if we already have a block template in the scene, we're going to destroy it. There it is. And we're just going to do that to ensure we don't end up with any duplicates or weirdness. It's just an easy way of doing that. We have a current template. Destroy it. There we go. Alright, cool. Now what do we want to do? So if we don't currently, well, if we don't have a current block type set, so if we don't currently have a block type selected, we need to do that. So we're going to say if the current block equals null. So if we don't have a current block, and we'll do a quick check to ensure that the all blocks array, which is in the block system, so we'll ensure that array is ready to go, because it may not be initialized yet. So just it's probably unlikely, but you never know. It's just a bit of a safety thing. Actually, because it will... Is it going to equal null? I don't think it will. We'll do it using the current block ID, actually. Because that should work too. So once again, that's the int we created up here. It's going to be 0 until we actually code in some way to adjust it. But we want that because that's what we're going to use to get a new block type. So if the all blocks array, the current all block that we want isn't null, then we're just going to get a new Alright, and the way we're going to do this, we're going to say current block is going to equal blocksys dot all blocks, and like we did above, current block ID. There we go. So now we just have a reference to whichever block is in element 0 of the all blocks array in the system script. So that will more than likely be whatever's first. I think it's like the dirt tile or something. Let's have a quick look. Come on, Unity, catch up. There we go. Yeah, it'll be the dirt tile because it'll go through the solid blocks and it's going through the backing blocks after that, I believe. So yep, element 0 will be the dirt block. So that's going to be our selected block until we actually code some way in to change that. Alright, cool. So what do we have? What have we done so far? All we've done is select a block type. We don't actually have anything in the world to represent that yet. Alright, cool. And at the moment it's going to do all this regardless of whether we actually, if build mode's on or off. It probably doesn't matter. It's just doing that behind the scenes. Yeah, so it shouldn't really matter. It won't matter at all. So we'll just say if build mode, so this is where we're actually going to do some of the fun stuff. We're going to create the template, etc. So if the build mode ends up being on, so if this is off, it'll be ignored. It won't do anything. What are we going to do? We're going to create a new object. So we'll say create object for block template. So the way we're going to do that, we're going to say block template. So this is actually going to be the object that's in the scene that we can see. It's going to follow the mouse around and tell you where you're actually going to place it. What will we call it? We'll just call it current block template. So this function here, we're just creating a new game object in the scene, and we're naming it current block template. Now we're going to want to add a sprite renderer to that object, and we could do it above here. I believe you can just pass parameters to give the components to add to the object when you create it, but I want to store a reference to it as well, so I'm going to do that separately. Add and store reference to a sprite renderer on the template. Oops, template object. Alright, cool. We're going to do that by saying current rend, so it's a variable we've got above, that one here. And this is always going to be storing a reference to the current template's renderer. Equals block template dot get component sprite renderer. There we go. And we also want to set the sprite of the template object to match the block type, or to match the current block type, so the block we currently have selected. And we're going to do that by saying current rend.sprite equals current block, oops, no, current block, where is it, there it is, dot block sprite. And this is where those variables needed to be public. If they were still private, you wouldn't be able to access the block sprite variable of that block, so that needs to be public. Make sure you have changed that. Cool. That, I believe, will actually do the trick. So ideally what happens is we press the E key, it's going to toggle the bool. If there is not a current, if there's currently a template, it's going to destroy it. So if build mode's off or on, it's going to destroy the current template. If we don't have a block currently selected, it's going to select one for us as long as that array is ready. And it won't matter if we've already got one selected or not, because all that'll happen is it'll just refresh it and just basically set the variable again. And it won't be doing that too often, only when we turn it on and off, so it shouldn't matter. And then ideally, if build mode ends up being on after all of this, it's going to then recreate the template, chuck it back in the scene and set it up for us. So if build mode's off, it won't matter. It'll just destroy everything, and then we won't have any template in the scene because it won't do any of this. And I hope that all makes sense. So let's see if that actually works. Hopefully it will. Soon find out. I'll just go back to Unity, give that one a quick second to catch up. Alright, now let's get that build system script and we'll add it to the game manager. And we don't have any variables that need to be set just yet, so that doesn't matter. Alright, let's go in and see what happens. Alright, so we're in the game. If I press E, probably not going to see it. It has added it. Where is it? Hasn't done it correctly, however, so something's not quite right. Ah, here we go. The script is trying to access it. I've coded it wrong. Sorry, guys. Let's have a quick look. What have I done? Not get component, add component. Sorry, I was being stupid. So that's in the build system script. Instead of block template dot get component, you want add component because we are adding that component. That makes sense. My bad. Try that again. Should see the block this time. It'll appear sort of like just over his shoulder, I think. Have a look. Hey, there it is. So we can turn it on and we can turn it off. It doesn't currently follow the mouse. We can't change the block, but there it is working. So the template will appear, it's visible, and it's showing up as our currently selected block. Here we go. And if we check the console as well, you can see we've still got the debug logs happening from the creation of the blocks. Just if that's of interest to you. Let's zoom out a bit. There we go. Alright, cool. Alright, that's cool. That works. That's what we want. So we have the template appearing in the scene. The next thing we probably want to do is try and make sure that that template will actually follow the mouse around the screen. And we're going to get a little tricky with that. It's going to be good fun. Do we need any variables? I think we're going to need one, which I'll add. We'll add that first. And this is going to be a variable to control the size of the block. So your sprite might be different sizes, or you may need to sort of adjust the scale of it, or the the pixels per unit of the sprite, and that's going to actually alter how it moves around the screen. So we're going to need to adjust that, and the best way to do that is by storing a float to control it, and you'll see. So float to adjust the size of blocks when placing in world, something like that. Easy. Let's make that serialized field so we can access this one from the editor. Oops, private float, and what will we call it? We'll call it block size mod. Block size modification, I guess. That works, whatever. Cool, and that'll become relevant in just a sec. So, where will we do this? I think it's going to be easiest to do this, well, obviously after this one. So we'll do this after the input get key down E. And we're going to say if build mode is on, and also if block template does not equal null. So we don't want this to happen if we don't have a block template in the screen. And it's not likely to because it's also controlled by build mode, but it's just an extra check to make sure that we're not going to have any problems later on. We're going to create two temporary floats here. We're going to say new pos x, and I'll just create a second one, new pos y, and they're going to equal, we're going to say mathf.round, and we're going to round, how are we doing this? We're going to get the position from the camera, so we'll say camera.main dot, screen to world point is what we want, and we're getting the input dot mouse position, and we want the x axis of that, and we're going to divide that by the block size mod, and the whole value we are going to then times or multiply by the block size mod. So that formula there is essentially going to round the position according to the value we've given it in the block size mod. For the sake of simplicity, I would recommend keeping this in sort of whole-ish numbers, so to speak, as in quarters perhaps, so 0, 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, 1, etc. If you sort of find you're having to adjust it any more than that, you're going to have some weird behavior from it. So I'll sort of show you that. We'll adjust some of the sprite sizes and you'll see how it behaves, just to make that a bit easier to show you. We're going to do the same for the other value, so camera.main.screen point to world, or screen to world point, input dot mouse position dot y, same again, divided by the block size mod, and then multiply the whole thing by block size mod again. Alright, cool. So those are our two rounded values that we're going to use for the position of the template. So to adjust the template, it's going to be really easy. We're just going to say block template dot transform dot position is going to equal a new vector2, which is comprised of those two values. So new pos x and new pos y. There you go. Easy peasy. Cool. So that should now allow it to move around the screen. We'll give it a quick test, and I'll try and show you those values as well. So if we go to the game manager, we can see it there. So that's currently set to 0. So it's probably going to be a little bit interesting if we try and run that. I wonder what will happen. Let's just see if it breaks. Probably needs to be 1. Yeah, I didn't think it'd like that. That's okay, so you can't have that on 0. Let's set it to 1. 1 should just mean that it's the default. It's moving around and rounding every value to 1. There we go, we can see that. But as you can see, that block's too small. So I think that block is actually, yeah, it looks like there'd be 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, so it's 0.25 of 1 unit. So if we adjust this to 0.25, 0.25 should work. Go back in. There we go. So that's more what we want. And the reason for that, I'll show you. We go to the dirt tile. You can see that the pixels per unit is set to 64, but the sprite itself is actually 16 by 16. So if we were to set that to 16, the sprite itself would be 1 by 1 unit in size. I'll just run the game to show you. There we go. Actually, I think that's a bit smaller, but in theory that's one unit. Oh, and it's still rounding to 0.25. That's why that's so small. Hang on. Sorry guys, just set that back to 1, so it's on the default value. So the object should be 1 unit by 1 unit in size, and it should move 1 unit in every direction. So it's rounding that position off to the nearest whole unit. So you can see that's cool and all, like that works, but obviously that block is huge. Well, I don't know, it depends what you want really. But we probably want our block to be a little bit smaller, or at least I do. I want it to look a bit smaller than that. We're sort of imitating Terraria or that King Arthur's gold style. The blocks are usually a bit smaller. So we could set it to 32. Let's try that. We'll just set the blocks, or the sprites pixels per unit, to 32. Because 32 is half of 64, which, hang on. No, what do we have it on? Sorry. 32 is double 16, which is what it was currently on. If we set that to 0.5, so essentially we're halving the rounding, you'll see that it still continues to work. Whereas if that was on 1, it would actually jump over 2 blocks. So to achieve the ideal size that I wanted being 64, so once again we're doubling. Apply that, go back to game manager, and we need to halve that number again, 0.25. And I don't think you'll really be able to go much lower than this. If you're going any lower than this, you probably want to adjust the size of your objects. And if we try that out, we'll see the block. That's sort of more the size that I'm after. So you could keep going, but then I would recommend starting with smaller sprites or adjusting the sprite sizes accordingly. Or you might need to start hard coding in the rounding a little bit differently, but it shouldn't be a huge problem. That should work, and I can't imagine that you'd be working with values too far out of that, so see how you go. Alright, cool. So we now have the build mode that works. We can turn it on and off, and we have a template to show that where we're building. At the moment, there's not really any restrictions on that. It's allowed to build, well, it can't build, it's just a template, but if it could build wherever it liked, as far away from the player as we like. You know, all of that. Not really what we want. All we can do is turn it on and off, and it follows the mouse cursor. So let's start working on some more stuff to try and make this a little bit different. And I think probably the first thing we'll want to try and do is build in some sort of a check to actually say, hey, can the object actually build in this location? That'll become a lot more relevant as we actually start placing blocks, but for now, I think we'll make it collide with the player, and we'll make it collide with the ground as well, just so we have something we can sort of see that happening. We're going to need a few different things for this, and it's going to get a little bit tricky because we're going to have to start thinking ahead. We'll see how we go. Shouldn't be too bad. We'll bring that up. Probably going to need a few variables. So what are we going to want? We're going to need a few. We'll need a boolean first of all. So we'll say private bool build blocked. Set that to false in the beginning. So this will be the variable that controls can the player actually place this block here. If they can't, this will be false. If they can, it'll be sorry, I'll reverse that. If they can't build, if the build position is blocked, this is going to be true. If they can build, it's going to be false because the position is not blocked. Right. Okay, what else are we going to need? Couple of layer masks, I would say. So I'll add these in here. Layer masks to control raycasting, because that's how we're going to do it. What will we use? We'll use 2 for now. We're actually going to break this up, and we're going to make them accessible to the editor so that we can set them easily. So private layer mask, and this is going to be a layer mask to control where we can place solid blocks. So we'll say solid blocks. No, actually solid no build layer. And we'll do the same for the backing blocks. Private layer mask, backing no build layer. So we're going to split the check up into solid or non-solid, depending on which block we currently have selected. Now, the reason we're doing this is because obviously you want to be able to place solid blocks over the top of backing blocks. So think of it in terms of foreground, background. So we are going to need to do a different check for both those block types, and the easiest way to split that up is just simply to split up the layer by using the layer masks. So we'll see that. We'll get into it in a little bit. I'll code in the player distance in a second. Well, first of all, we'll just do the collision checking. I think that's probably going to be the easiest to start with, and then we can move on from there. So we'll go back down. We can probably do the rest of this in this function here, if build mode on and if the block template isn't null, because in theory most of this we only want to do if we're actually building or if we have build mode on. We don't want to be firing raycasts all the time if we don't actually need them, so we're going to control that by putting everything inside this check here. Alright, first thing, let's create a raycast hit 2D, which we'll call ray hit. We're just going to create that for now. We don't need it just yet. So if the current selected block is solid equals true, so if the block we currently have selected, the block type is solid, then alright, we're going to say ray hit is equal to physics 2D dot raycast. Where is it? There it is. Where we're going to fire that raycast? We're going to fire it from the block templates position. Oops. Position. We're going to fire it in the direction of vector 2.0, so just essentially from the screen towards the world. It's going to be mathf.infinity because it doesn't matter about the distance. And we're going to use the solid no build layer because we are checking the solid blocks at the moment. Alright, we don't need to do any more with that just yet. So we're going to add in the else. So otherwise, if it's not a solid block, then ray hit is going to equal pretty much the same thing, just using the backing no build layer instead. Alright, cool. So if that ray has actually hit something, then really it means that the building is blocked, because the only things it's going to hit in either of those cases are things that we're not going to be able to build over the top of, and that's the beauty of the layer masks, is it allows us to do that. So now we can just simply say if ray hits collider does not equal null. So if we've actually hit something, and I should probably do that as an if condition, that would be better. So if we've actually hit something, then build blocked is going to equal true. So we can't build, there's something in the road. If we haven't hit something, then build blocked is going to equal false. There isn't anything in the road. Beautiful. Alright, that's cool, that's straightforward. Now we want to actually represent that to the player, so I think probably the easiest way to do that is just to update the sprite a little bit to make the sprite look different. And rather than coding in, you know, a different sprite for every single block, the easiest way we're going to do that, I reckon, is just to change the color of the sprite. So we're going to do that by saying if build is blocked, so if build blocked, The current rend, so the sprite render attached to the current template, its color is going to equal a new color. And we're just going to set that manually, so we're just going to say 1, because we're going to turn it red, so we're just going to turn the green and blue values down to nothing. Easiest to do that, and the alpha value we're going to leave at 1, otherwise we won't be able to see the sprite. That's it. So, if build is blocked, change the color of the sprite to be red. Otherwise, and we'll just go up here and pinch this, set it back to default, and default would just be 1, 1, 1, 1. There you go. Cool. I reckon that's about it for now, because we're not really doing anything else, so that should work for us. We will need to set a couple of variables though, so we'll go into the editor once that updates. What do we got? Alright, we're going to need to set the layers, so the things we don't want each block type to collide with. So for the solid blocks, we don't want to collide with the player, the ground, or other solid blocks. So easy peasy. Player, ground, solid blocks. Now it won't matter if a solid block can collide with a backing block, because in theory the backing block is behind it. So we'll split that up here. The backing blocks, we're just doing the same thing. The ground layer, the player layer, and the backing block layer. So you can see those two differences there. That should be all we need to do. Let's save that. And save project and play. And if we bring up that, if it collides with the player, it should turn red. Hey, there you go. We can see it there. Awesome. It's currently behind the player. We could probably adjust that. When we create the object, we could just adjust its order in layer. We'll do that with the blocks themselves, but I won't do it with the template. You get the idea. So it's only getting the rounded position as well. So if your mouse cursor is clipping with the player, but the position of the template itself isn't actually over that collider, then it won't turn red. You could probably adjust that if you wanted to by just simply using the mouse position instead of the template's position. Which, where were we doing that? Here, where we're firing the raycast, we're firing from the block template, not the mouse position. Up to you how you want to do that though. Just sort of depends what suits your game the best. Alright, I think in the interests of keeping this quick, I won't finish the comments. I won't keep doing the comments, but the final project will have them in there anyway. Otherwise, cool, we'll just keep going. Alright, cool. Next thing we need to do. So, what's happening is, if we're colliding or if we can't place the block, then we're updating a couple of variables and changing the look of it. Next thing we'll probably do is add in a check to tell the distance from the player. So, if the player's not close enough, we want to also block the building. We don't want to be able to build if the player's heaps far away. I reckon the easiest way to do that, we're going to need a variable to actually store a reference to the player. So we'll do that after the layer masks. I wasn't going to do this, but oh well, I'll just do it for the variables. What will it be? Private game object, player object, nice and easy, and we'll store that. We'll get that in awake. Easiest way, player object dot equals game object dot find player. So it's just going to find the player. There we go. Okay. So where are we doing the checks? Here we are. So we're doing the check here. Sorry, we will need one more variable. I'll just do it after the player object. We'll make it a float. Oh, we'll make it a serialized field float, so that we can actually set this in the editor. Private float. There we go. What are we going to call it? Call it like, I think we'll call it max build distance, something like that. Should be fine. There we go. Cool. And down here, so just after the check to see if we collided with anything, we'll do one more check, and we'll just say if vector2 dot distance between the player object transform.position, and the current template, no, what is it, template, block template, transform.position. So if this position is greater than the max build distance, then build blocked is going to equal true. And we're not going to have an else condition with that, because otherwise it would overwrite any collisions we have up here. Doesn't matter that blocking the build, like using it this way, is overriding this check here, because ideally, if it's too far away, it doesn't matter whether it's colliding or not. If it's too far away, we can't build. But if we did have that else condition in there, if we said else if it's not, you know, if it's less than that distance, you know, set it back to true, then it's going to obviously, or set it to false, it's going to overwrite what we did before. Okay. I hope that makes sense, guys. I do apologize. I'm losing my voice a little bit, I think. But I think that should do the trick. That should just allow us to do a distance check. We'll just set that variable in the editor when it updates. There it is. Max build distance, 2. Try 2. That should work. Alright, cool. So it's following. If we get too far away, it goes red. We won't be able to build there. Beautiful. Alright, next thing we probably want to do is actually build some stuff. So place some objects in the scene. Excuse me, it shouldn't be too hard to do that one, I don't think. We'll do that within the same... I think we could probably do it within the same check. Have a bit of a look. Let's see. Let's bring up that script again. Alright. Yep, we will. So yeah, we only want to do this if build mode's on. So we'll do it within that check as well. So if... Oops. Input dot get mouse button. Get mouse button down. Which mouse button? Oops. 0. So if the player presses the left mouse button, do we need to do any more checks as part of that? Yes, we do. So we'll say if the player clicks the left mouse button and build blocked is false, so if the player can actually build, if they're not blocked, then we're going to create a new block object in the scene. This is the cool stuff. I'm going to say game object, we'll say new block, we'll need a reference to it. It's going to equal a new game object, similar to what we did above with the template, but this time we're just going to say current block dot block name. So we're going to name the new block object according to the block type. So if it's a wood block, it'll be called wood block in the scene, etc. We're going to set its position, so we'll say new block.transform.position. It's going to equal the block template's transform position. There we go. What else? We're also going to want a reference to the sprite renderer, and we're going to need to, like we did before, we're going to need to add one and store a reference. New rend, we'll call it that, equals new block. New block dot add component. Oops. Sprite renderer. There it is. And we need to set the sprite. So new block. No, hang on. New rend dot sprite going to equal. What's it going to equal? It's going to equal the current block dot block sprite. Cool. So that will add. That'll add the block. It'll create it. It'll give it a name. It'll update its position to be where the template object currently is. And it'll then get the reference to the renderer and change the sprite to match our currently selected block. Okay, now we need to do a couple more things after creating that. And we're going to do this based on if the block is solid or not. So if the current block is solid, is true. So if this is a solid block, we're going to add a component. So again, new block.add component. And it's going to be a box collider 2D. So we're adding a collider. We're going to adjust the layer of this object so that it sits on the solid objects, the solid blocks layer. And we're going to need to know the number of that. So if we actually go to any object, when it updates, we just check the layers. And we can see that layer 10 is the solid block, layer 11 is the backing block. That's what we're going to use. We're going to do that by saying that the new block dot layer equals, what do we want? So it's solid, so we want it to be 10. So that's the solid block layer. And after creating the layer, we also want to adjust the sorting order of the object as well, so that it will appear in front of the backing blocks, so as a foreground, because it's a solid block. We're going to do that by saying the sprite renderer's sorting order is going to equal minus 10. That'll do. So it should, in theory, be behind the player, though that'll never happen. The player collides with it, but it'll be behind the player, but we'll set it to be in front of the backing blocks. And that's all we need to do there. So else, this time we're doing the non-solid, so if it's not a solid block, same again, new block dot add components. What is it? It's a box collider 2D again. This time we're going to set the new blocks layer to equal 11, so that's the backing block layer, and new rend dot sorting order is going to equal what, minus 15. That'll do. So it appears behind solid blocks. Alright, cool. Just having a quick look. That should allow us to place blocks in the scene. I'm pretty sure. Soon find out. Let's give it a test. I don't think there was any other variables we needed to set for that. Let's just check. Game manager, nope. Cool. Alright, this should work. Let's go. Following us. Click, 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 click. Yay, look at that. And we can't place anywhere that's blocked. So we can place it there. But if it's outside of our range, we can't. If it's blocked, we can't. Oop. I'm going to just nearly broke the player. We can see that the player is colliding with it too, which is nice. What we want to happen. There you go. That's the placement. Alright. What else? We'll probably want a way to destroy the blocks as well. We'll need another layer mask for that, I reckon. Where are our layer masks? There they are. And it's just going to be like a layer mask to reference all the blocks in the world. And it's only going to be the block layers. So all blocks layer. And we'll just set that. Just go into the editor before I forget to do it. When that appears, all blocks is just going to be the solid block and the backing block. There it is. Now we'll code that in, bring that back up. How will we do it? I reckon we'll just do it with a right mouse click, probably the easiest way. We'll just do it after the left mouse click check. So if input dot get mouse button down 1 should be the right mouse button, I believe. And the block template does not equal null. Do that again. We're going to need to, whoops, what did I do that for? We're going to need another raycast. So raycast hit 2D, we'll just destroy hit, that'll do. Equals physics 2D dot raycast. And it's going to fire from the block template position like last time. It's going to pretty much be exactly the same. Vector 2.0, mathf.infinity to infinity and beyond. And all blocks layer. So in theory, it's only going to hit another block. And it's going to be really easy. So if destroy hit.collider does not equal null, destroy ray, destroy hit, there it is, dot collider dot game object. Excuse me. Cool, so if we hit a block when we click the right mouse button, then we're just going to destroy it. Nice and easy. Nothing too fancy. Okay, cool. Just do a quick save on that. We can test that out, why not? Might as well. And we'll just place a couple of blocks. Click, click, click. And right click. There we go. It's destroying them. Nice. That's what we want. Alright, so probably the last thing we need to do is make some way for the player to actually cycle through the blocks that they want to build. So the available blocks. Once you get an inventory or something in place, this will probably change. But for now, the simplest and easiest way to do that, if I bring the script back up, what do we got? So we've got an int there. We're going to need to know how many blocks we can actually build, so we'll store a variable for that. We'll say private int selectable blocks total. That'll do. and we'll be setting that a bit later. We won't set it in awake, we'll do it later on in the actual function. The reason being because just in case the array isn't ready, we don't want to cause any errors. So we've got a current block, we've got an ID for the block. We're going to have a total, like a maximum amount that we can cycle through. Don't think we need anything else. Nope, cool. Alright, so the way we're going to do this for now, I'm probably just going to use the mouse wheel. I'd say that's going to be the easiest way to do it. Do it after we do the check, after we set the colors, so after we've actually checked to see if the build's blocked or not. And we'll do it by saying float mouse wheel, so a new float that we're creating, input dot get axis mouse. I think it needs to be capitalized. Mouse scroll wheel, I think that's it. So if the mouse wheel axis does not equal 0, so if the axis is active, it'll either be below or above 0. Alright, we'll do it here. Selectable blocks total is going to equal blocksys dot all blocks dot length minus 1. And we're doing it as -1 because we want the... Oh, what did I do that for? Where'd it go? Where'd it go? We want it to be -1 so that it marries up with the array. We want it to be the same as the array, or we'll get null reference exceptions. The way we're going to do this anyway. So if the mouse wheel, is greater than 0, and I think this actually ends up being a down scroll, so we're going to say current block ID -1. If the current block ID is less than 0, so if we've gone below 0 just now, then the current block ID is going to equal the selectable blocks total. So that should be the end element in the all blocks array when we select it. That's all we need to do there. Else if, we don't really need to do an else if, but I'm going to do it anyway. Else if the mouse wheel is, sorry, just having a look. Mouse wheel is less than 0. What did we do? We did greater than 0? Yes, yes. So if the mouse wheel is going in the opposite direction, then current block ID is going to add 1, and then same again. If the current block ID is greater than selectable blocks total, then we want to set it back to 0. ID is going to equal 0. There we go. Easy. Okay, so that's just cycling a number. Now we actually need to do something with that number. So we'll do that below the last check there. Current block is going to equal... I'm just wondering if I should do this in its own function. No, I don't think I will. We'll just do it here. So current block is going to... it's going to equal the blocksys dot all blocks current block ID. Yep, that should do it. So that'll give us a new current block type. And current rend dot sprite is going to equal the current block dot block sprite. So that we're not really updating the object as such. The template doesn't matter. It's sort of, the template's just there basically as a holder for the sprite and to tell, well, and to use the position. Everything else is based on the block that we have selected, the current block. The template's just, it doesn't matter what block it is, it doesn't have any other data apart from the sprite attached to it, so all we need to do is update that sprite, which is what we've just done there. And I think that should be it. Well, I've done this all right. Let's have a look. We just do a save, go in, play it, when it catches up, and using mouse wheel we should be able to cycle through it. And there you have it. Now let's try some placing. I'm going to place some stone. Oops, too far away, so I'll just move over. There we go. Place some wooden backing. So in theory we shouldn't collide with the wood, but we should with the stone. That seems to be working. I can't move through the stone, and I should be able to place solid blocks on top of that, which I can. If I delete them, we're left with the backing block. Delete again, it's gone. And as you can see, I can't place other backing blocks on top of them. but I can place it behind the solid. And I can't adjust anything or interfere with the world in any way if build mode is off. So that's it, guys. That's the system, or at least the start of it. Like I said, we can expand from here. We can build an inventory and a GUI, which we're going to cover in the next couple of videos. I'm going to take a bit of a break between this one and those. Nothing too long, because I haven't actually done those systems up yet. I need to create them for you. So which I'll do. I'll test them out, make sure it works at least sufficiently, and then I'll do the videos. So they're probably only going to be a couple of days, and then hopefully the next one should be out. So part 4, what are we? Yep, part 3. Next one's part 4. Part 4 is going to cover the very basic inventory and just help you to get some framework down, so that if you want to expand on it and have something a bit nicer in place, like you want crafting or whatever, you should be able to adapt this to that without any problems. Thanks for watching, guys. Please like and subscribe and stick around, because like I said, I'll try and have the next one out very, very shortly. Thanks again. As always, guys, I'll see you next time.